Deafrowe with Deafrowe TV, and I'm back again with another review. And this week we're going to take on the 1979 The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the first book of the Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis. Uh, the director of this is Bill Melendez, and there's a little story behind that, and I'll get to that later. But before I do, remember to hit that like, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you can see what other videos I post in the future and maybe go back and check out some of my older stuff as well. And as a side note, I will be on After the Weekend again for the rest of this month of November on every Monday coming up. So please go over there and check out their stuff as well. I'm going to leave a link in the description to the After the Weekend podcast. So let's get going on this review for The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, 1979. It was a made for TV cartoon based on the first book, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe of the Chronicles of Narnia series. And if you know a little bit about the Chronicles of Narnia, you know that The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe was the first book released in the series. The one that plays a prequel to, or plays as a prequel to this, is The Magician's Nephew, was actually one of the last ones released. So chronologically, The Magician's Nephew is the first book if you want to do it in a straight timeline. But if you do it in the time of release, then that this book would be the first, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. So as you can see here, we have Lucy, we have Edmund, we have Susan, we have Peter, all talking together at the professor's house, the mansion or whatever, just like you would in the book, and just like you. There are slight differences, and one of the things that I have uh, gathered from watching this movie and watching some of the uh, special features on the DVD, the animation crew, the director, they only had 9 months to complete this cartoon because they had a set date for it to air on CBS. One of the reasons being is the original studio that was supposed to be doing this kept never just kept arguing for almost 2 years straight, or not, a year and a half straight, really, or a year and 3 months, whatever. Anyway, uh, they could never come to agreement on how this was supposed to take place, and they kind of gave up on it and just let it go. But the whole point of this cartoon to be aired on CBS on live television is going to be a 2 day event, so it was cut up in two spaces. It's supposed to take up 2 hours, 1 hour apiece. So if you watch the movie, it comes out to right at an hour and a half total. So that makes sense when you look at the way television is set up. You got 45 minutes of TV and then 15 minutes of commercials. Yeah, at least back then you did in 1979. But it was actually this show, this movie was sponsored by Kraft, and at the time Kraft was trying to do something to get kids to read more books. And the way they did that, they by sponsoring this and getting this movie out there on CBS, they were able to get kids interested in reading the Chronicles of Narnia. Because one of the things that they would do in the schools was ask you, if when you got done reading the book and then you watched this, they would make you like write a report of what the difference between the book and the cartoon was. And we kind of do something similar today, just on our own. Anytime we see a movie in theaters like Lord of the Rings, or like Chronicles of Narnia, we always, just in the back of our minds or right in the front of our minds, depending on how interested you are in it, you make a mental note of what the differences are between what you read in the book and what you saw in the movie. And sometimes the differences are just some things are left out. You know, like at the beginning of this cartoon, they don't show you the whole thing with them trying to get away from uh, the city and make it out to the professor's mansion in the country because of World War II breaking out. So they don't show that part in the cartoon. They're just there at the professor's mansion when you first see the four kids. And then, of course, you see the whole thing with Mr. Tumnus and everything else as well. Now, I would say who the actors are that play uh, the voices, the voice actors are. But from what I understand, there's two sets of voice actors for the boys. I mean, for the kids and the adults and so forth. And a lot of that had to do with they didn't want the English voices in the American version of this movie. And so what they did is they got American voice actors or just American voices in general. They didn't really hire actors. They just, from what I understand, there was actually, because this was being done in Britain, I think at the time, they went to an American school in Britain and got some American kids to come in and do some voice acting, which is kind of cool. And as you see here, I mean, Tumnus, I never understood, like when I watched this as a kid, I always wondered why Tumnus was like red. And I've read the book, so I can't remember if there's any descriptors of Tumnus other than he's a fawn and they showed the hair, talk about the hair and that kind of stuff. I don't remember him being red and green like this, but I have to go back and look at the book again. Maybe I'm missing something myself. But yeah, it's pretty cool. This is the whole first part where Tumnus is telling Lucy to go back and everything, and then we get to this part where you know Lucy's talking to the kids and trying to explain to her where she went, and they don't believe her. And so when they play hide and seek again, she goes back into the wardrobe. Edmund follows her, and then of course Edmund doesn't find her, but ends up finding the White Witch instead. And then he thinks the White Witch is all this powerful and great person that's going to take care of him and befriends her. Well, thinks he befriends her. And of course, he goes back to the wardrobe, and then he tries to play it off. He tries to play it off to the other Peter and Susan that what she saw wasn't real. She's just playing. I'm just playing along with her. And so Susan and Peter go to the professor, and like he's like, "What should we do?" It's like sometimes the most unbelievable is the believable. The whole 9 yards with the professor, because the professor is the magician's nephew. He's the one that's the apple tree, the woods from the apple tree is made in the wardrobe. Blah blah blah. Yeah, if you've read that book, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And so Lucy and not Lucy, Susan and Peter decide to take Lucy's word for it, and they go through the wardrobe too. Obviously, coming out on the other end and seeing what it was really, and Peter at one time actually confronts Edmund about lying about the whole thing, and then finally make it to Mister and Mrs. Beaver's place. Well, they go to Tumnus first, and realize Tumnus is missing, and Edmund this whole time is being a little grumpy, shit, and not being cool about it because he's of the mindset that the White Witch is the good person and everybody else is the bad person. So yeah, and like I said before, there's two versions with two different two different sets of voice actors. They got the English voice actors on one version and the American voice actors on another version. But the only person they kept the same, if I've looked at the special features on the DVD correctly, in the way they were talking, is Aslan is the only voice that they kept the same, and that actor is Stephen Thorne doing the voice of Aslan, and I can see why too. I mean, he has a damn good voice, and it projects outward like you would think in that like a lion would. You don't want it to be falling flat. Anyway, yeah, they're at Beaver's house, and Beaver's trying to protect them. And as the Beaver's talking about everything that's going on and Aslan coming back in that whole 9 yards, that's when Edmund disappears on him and stuff and tries to make his way to the White Witch. He makes it to the White Witch, and the White Witch pretty much turns on him at this point. It's like, how come you didn't bring the rest of them with you? And he's like, well, I thought I was good enough for you. I thought I was your friend. And of course not. She's like playing him the whole time. Anyway, as the Beavers and the other three kids are trying to make their way out away from the White Witch, they come across this table of folks basically celebrating Christmas, and that's kind of another thing they leave out in this, and that you don't ever see Santa Claus. Whereas you do see Santa, I mean, you do read it's about Santa Claus in the first book, so they kind of leave that part completely out. Because I want to say Santa Claus is the one. Well, I might be tripping. I've seen every version of this as far as like movies go. I've seen the 1988 BBC TV series, and I've seen the most current Disney movies, and I've read the book. So I might be messing things up, but I know I think if Santa Claus is the one that gives them all their tools, or the sword, the shield for Peter, Susan the bow and arrow and the arrows, and then for Lucy the dagger and the elixir that helps her bring, heals people. Some it had, but in this, the lion actually gives all those tools to them, and you never see Santa Claus. And why they cut it out, I don't know. Maybe it's time constraints. Like I said, the people that made this version only had 9 months to make it because the previous people that were supposed to make it dropped out. Kind of a weird thing. Anyway, as they're running away from the White Witch, spring is coming back because one of the things that the White Witch did was keep spring from happening, so it was always winter. So we do see that part of it, and that is in the book, and that is, and see, like I said, this part right here, well, it's the lion giving them all their tools. I want to say in the book, it's actually Santa Claus. uh, so that's a little bit different. And then, of course, the White Witch realizes that she has to kill Edmund in order to keep the prophecy from happening, because the prophecy says that two sons of Adam and two daughters of Eve will rule over Narnia. And to keep that from happening, she thinks, okay, well, I'll just kill Edmund, and the prophecy can never happen. So she goes to tie him up to a damn tree. So she can't capture all four of them. She believes at least if I take one of them out, it ruins the prophecy altogether. So she tries to do that, and of course, all the Aslan's folks come in and save Edmund. But something happens, and the White Witch, like in the book, she comes and said, "No, Edmund's life is forfeit to me because I rule over that part of Narnia. You must give it over to me." And the lion, and this is in the book too, he goes and talks to her in private. And they pretty much set up a pact. And that night, not Edmund, Lucy and Susan follow the lion to the table. And the lion is strapped to the table, shaved down, and stabbed to death by the White Witch. Just like, that part's hard to change because that is a pivot point, a straight up, you can't change that part in any version of this. It just wouldn't make any sense because everything hinges on this part of the book slash movie slash cartoon, whatever you want to. So yeah, so we get towards the end here. The lion comes back because uh, for him to be killed on the table was blasphemy. I'm just going to put it that way. I know there's a whole line of dialogue that explains why killing him on the table breaks the table and breaks everything. So I just don't know it off the top of my head. Anyway, so Aslan makes his way to the White Witch's lair, castle, whatever, and unfreezes everybody from their concrete prison that they had, and uses them to come back and help the others that are also being turned into concrete here, as you can see. So the White Witch is kind of using her power against everybody fighting from afar, like a coward. She's not in the fight herself. She's just like turning the different enemies into stone while the others are fighting. And that's when Edmund kind of gets pissed off. He's tired of seeing that. and Edmund actually makes an attempt on the yeah. So Edmund actually does get the upper hand for a split second, and then Peter steps in and starts fighting the White Witch. But even Peter can't get to her exactly. So if I get just right here, yeah, here we go. I think that's about right. She's about to stab Peter here. I mean, it's not the best in the world, but when I was a kid, I really enjoyed watching this. And then I actually, read the book not too long after this. In the way that I have watched everything too, this was my first entry into, for me, to anything Chronicles of Narnia. Was this cartoon. And this cartoon started my segue into the books, and then my segue into the Disney movies that were made later. And then I went back, and after I seen all of those, I actually looked into the 1988 BBC series, and that was pretty decent for the time that it was made. And I watched all those as well. And the BBC series is the only one that did a silver chair, the one of the books that has never been put on anything else as far as like the Disney movie or a cartoon of any sort. The Silver Chair is actually a really good book, and I was surprised to see that the BBC did the Silver Chair into an actual series. So that's one of the cool things about going back and look at some of the stuff that you didn't know was made, but then you go find it and it's like, holy crap, this is pretty cool. So yeah, we see the lion finally catch up with the fight that's going on. And he sees the witch down there, does the roar, wakes him up, and I've always liked this part as a kid because she's got the upper hand on Peter right here, as you can see. But then, uh, not until the lion shows up and smashes her. So yeah, pretty cool part in the movie. And then, all four of them become the two kings and the two queens that was prophesized, and they ruled over Narnia for a long period of time. But during this time, they kind of want to go home. They still think of home, and they can't find the lamp post. That's kind of a marker of which direction to go to get home, back to the wardrobe. Um, let's see. As you can see here, they grow into adults, and they rule like they're supposed to. That everything is all great and good, and you know Narnia is experiencing peace and everything else. And you get to this part right here, you can see the animation is just slightly different. They blend it together. They blend it together pretty well. But for what I understand in the special features is that they didn't have enough time to film these scenes right here with the horse moving and everything and chasing the white stag. So what they did is they got some folks to get on some real people to get on a horse, and they filmed it, and then they rotoscoped it into the original cartoon. So this one little scene right here is actually rotoscoped and not like the rest of the movie, which it kind of works. It blends in fairly well. They really did a pretty good job of making it similar to what you've seen before. It's a little more fine lines and more detail to it that you can see, but at the same time, that kind of goes along with you as you get older, you fill out anyway, so you become a little bit more detailed, I guess. For some people, that is, not everybody. So yeah, this is the same as the book as well. They've chasing the white stag, and then they end up At this point, they've been there for so long and been ruling for so long that they've pretty much given up on finding the lamppost and getting back home through the wardrobe. Uh, so they just relegated to themselves to being the kings and queens of Narnia until they die. But then that doesn't happen because the white stag has become something they've been chasing after for a long time. Not to kill it or anything, but just like to catch it. And the white stag leads them to the lamppost accidentally here, and that's when the yeah. See if I can catch the transition point here. There we go. Yeah. Boom, boom. There's, yeah, Peter, Edmund, Lucy, and Susan all back through the wardrobe. And they all are back to their original age as well. So all that time they spent in Narnia ruling over years and years and years and years is all pretty much gone now, and it's in their head is no more than a dream. And they go to the professor afterwards and ask him, like, was that real? Is that it's as real as you think it is? And so the professor knows. But yeah, and that pretty much ends the movie for the most part. So yeah. But like I said, in my opinion, I mean, I would have to put this somewhere because this is such a nostalgic trip for me. Uh, I mean, it's going to be up there in the 4-star range for me, maybe a 4.5, 4.25. I don't know. Uh, because this was my introduction to the Chronicles of Narnia, and it might have been for a lot of people too. Because, like I said, this entire thing was used to put on CBS, sponsored by Kraft, to get kids to start reading books, and it did work. It was very successful. In fact, this cartoon actually won an Emmy. It won an Emmy for Outstanding Animated Program in 1979, Primetime Emmy. So yeah, awesome stuff. I mean, rightly deserved. I mean, even when I was a kid watching this, I thought this thing was the greatest thing in the world. I mean, I watch it now and I'm not as enthusiastic about it because I've seen all the other stuff too. But I always thought this cartoon intrigued me enough to want to read the books, and that was kind of the point of it to begin with. So, and when you really think about it, the book was released in 1950, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And for something to last as long as it has in media and cartoons and movies and that kind of stuff, it's got staying power. I wish they would go back. And the way I wish this would happen is if they would the studios would start with the chronological order of the books and come out with The Magician's Nephew as the first movie that leads into The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and then continue on. Do one movie a year until you have all 7 movies. That'd be an awesome. Instead of this skipping around, because even the BBC series that they did, they started with The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. They did another one, and then the Silver Chair, I think, was the last one they did. The Dawn Treader was the second one. Uh, the Silver Chair is very dark. That would make it, and then the very last movie is very. I mean, the last book is very dark, end of the world type shit. So I mean, it'd be awesome to see all of them if they ever get made, even just like a HBO series where they do one movie at a time, or one season is one book, second season is the second book, so on and so forth in chronological order. That'd be freaking awesome to me. But yeah, 4-star movie for me. I'll put it I put it around 82% on critic list. And that's my review of the Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe from 1979, based on C.S. Lewis's book. Awesome stuff. Love this cartoon. And as me, Deafrowe, out.